Welcome to BNEWS Weekly Special Report. I'm Phil Gallagher, along with my guest today, Burlington Public Library Director Michael Wick. Welcome to the program, Mike.
Well, thanks for having me, Phil.
Mike's in his third year at the library, and we're going to start with the basics, of course.
Yeah.
First of all, give us a little background. Where'd you go to school? How did you arrive at your interest in books? By the way, which is our secondary subject matter today, the book.
Well, it really wasn't intentional, my arrival at being a librarian, to be entirely honest. I started at Indiana University. I was an undergraduate in literature, and I received a certificate in peace and conflict studies. They had a pretty robust program, nonviolence, learning about civil rights and everything. So I was just kind of testing out the grounds, see what was available. After I graduated, I ended up going into customer service, met a lovely woman who eventually became my wife, moved out to the Boston area. And so while I was out here, I started working in hotels, hotel management, customer service, and later in accounting within the hotel, overseeing the accounting department. I was working at a hotel downtown Boston in the financial district.
Pretty dry stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the hours were pretty grind too. In the hospitality industry, people who work in it, you work late hours. And so I really wasn't happy with that. And I knew I could do something else and something more in tune with the idea of giving back to the community, because that's really the certificate that I received in peace and conflict studies. That was intentional on my part to give back to the community and figure out a way to do that. So I started talking to my wife about going back for my master's. And I thought of two different avenues, maybe being a high school literature teacher or being a librarian. And so I thought on that for a while, and then one day it hit me. I was a pretty good student in high school. I was a good kid, but I still gave my teachers heck. And I knew that karma was going to come back and get me one way or the other.
So you had a child.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided to become a librarian and took my first classes at Simmons and really enjoyed them. I felt like it was the perfect meshing of lifelong learning, service to the community, and providing a great service to individuals within that community. So I never looked back.
So let's go to the book now,
Yeah.
And the origins of the book. We can talk about. I'm going to sneeze.
Go ahead. Bless you.
Oh, good Lord, excuse me. Okay, so let's start with the book. Really, it's the transfer of knowledge. So let's go all the way back. I guess the first time that happened was cave drawings, right?
And then what you start looking at later on is, because that was more pictorial, pictograms. It really wasn't words or anything like that. Language, and eventually clay tablets. So like you and I were discussing before, and then the book. And I always like saying that the book is one of the oldest technologies, and like the wheel, it's something that we really haven't improved upon much. The wheel is still a circle. We see it everywhere we go. Same thing with the book.
Still a page with words on it.
Exactly. Glued together or somehow bound together. You have printed words on it. The paper maybe dissolves a little bit better now than vellum. Sure. What they were using in the Middle Ages or something like that. But
or
essentially,
calfskin.
Yeah, exactly. But essentially, the technology remains the same. Right. And so when the digital age, which I know we're going to be talking a little bit about too, came. I really wasn't that concerned for libraries because in my opinion, it wasn't the improvement on books that it was being hailed as.
Well, let's go back a little bit and talk about Gutenberg for a minute. I mean, that was the really leap forward, wasn't it, in terms of the general distribution of transference of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Really across the globe.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, so it was difficult to purchase a book because it took so much time to write everything by hand. Books were just created by individuals who were copying from another book as opposed to movable print. And that revolutionized more so than books even, daily tracts, pamphlets, and it made it much more important for individuals to know how to read. And so that was part and parcel, the education of individuals. Because
and
a lot of
politics
people,
as well.
Yeah, but a lot of people really didn't know how to read at the same time because they didn't have the reason to start reading. And so then once you had that, the world changed in such significant ways.
Yeah. Charles Eliot, who was a 44-year president of Harvard, had alluded to that in one of the articles that he had written for the Atlantic in 18-something. I can't even remember the date. But he had said that it was a national security issue, the need to read, because we were getting these farm boys that were coming into the military and couldn't read orders, couldn't read maps, and it became that much more important.
Yeah.
So now we get to the digital age. Everybody's got a Kindle or an iPad or whatever these other things are. You can go on the computer, you get it.
Yeah.
How large an impact in the general population has that been in terms of advocating for reading?
Sure. Well, I think what happened was that it impacted the publishing industry in major, major ways. Book publishers, interestingly enough, felt that they were really in danger. And they may have been, and they may have responded the correct way, but what we see is that actual physical print book sales right now are coming back, and they're coming back in a big way.
Really?
What it really did impact, though, especially with the advent of the internet and this dissemination of information and knowledge, newspapers,
Print
magazines.
media,
Yeah. Really what we're seeing in the library is that when we go to order magazines for the library, that list every year dwindles. A series of magazines that we're actually just looking to see if we can get a better price on our print subscription service this year. And so one of our reference librarians showed me a list, and he said, oh, look, there's about 5 of these magazines that are going to be discontinued next year. So that happens every year too, that these are consolidated, they move online. Newsweek did that. I think about 3 or 4 years ago, they moved online entirely. Newspapers especially too. We see that with local newspapers. We see that with national newspapers, that having this information presented on the internet, which gives that immediate access and the immediate ability to update, that really has revolutionized that media in a big way. We also see it with music CDs, which I know you and I share a passion for. TV series, DVDs, movies. This has really revolutionized that as well. I think we've also seen a shift away from movies towards television shows as kind of a long format,
which you can archive
show.
on your own device.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's kind of a side impact. But having people able to access this through streaming, on their Apple TV, their Roku, their Kindle Fire Stick, or their Amazon Fire Stick, that revolutionized that industry as well. Like Blockbuster, I think there's only one Blockbuster that's left. But what I will say is that, interestingly enough, at the library, we see that type of media being a very high circulator, because you still have to pay for all of this if it's streaming.
Right.
There's no good one payment to your cable company that gives you access to all this stuff.
Right.
And so you get nickel and dimed because you want to watch this episode, or you want to watch this television series, or you want to listen to this song, or you want to watch this movie, and it's $20 here, $5 there, $9 there. And the same thing with books. We would hear from a lot of people who would get their first Kindle, they would go whole hog and just start buying every book, because you don't have to worry about shelf space.
Exactly.
Got this device that can hold 1,000 books on it. You just keep buying. But the problem is typically your wallet can't withstand that pressure. And so a lot of people are, coming to the library because if you want to watch a movie, typically you don't buy movies anymore. You stream a movie, you rent a movie online. Same thing with the library. And so that's really driving a lot of that circulation of our materials.
Okay, so what is the circulation breakdown? It used to be just you went to the library, it was magazines, it was books.
Yeah.
Then the advent of the digital revolution. Are you seeing a direct impact in terms of the number of clients that you're servicing? What is the split in between the print and the digital circulation?
Sure. So the amount of people that we see really hasn't changed. We get about 150,000 people annually.
Through the door?
Yeah, through the door in the library. And that number is increasing if it's going anywhere over time. It's not decreasing. And that's, of course, because of a lot of our other services that we provide in addition to materials that we circulate. But in terms of circulations of those materials, we're holding steady, which is surprising because a lot of libraries experienced a deep cut in their circulation statistics as people felt like they could purchase a Kindle and take it home and have access to all the world's materials. Now, we still do see people who do that, come into the library and get a library card and never come back to the library, and they're still using our library materials because they're using our ebooks through Overdrive. If they have an iPad, they're able to watch TV series through Hoopla.
You got a free download for music. Which one is that?
Yeah, Freegal. We've got
Freegal.
that as well. And now we also have magazines through Overdrive as well. So a lot of those digital magazines, I know I subscribe to the New Yorker, and it's difficult because you get a magazine every week. It's filled with about 2.5 hours of reading.
Right, exactly.
And I can't devote that much time.
And sometimes you got to hold a dictionary while you're reading.
Exactly, exactly. And so, for me, I'm already starting to consider dropping my subscription to the New Yorker because it's like the telltale heart, beating and making me feel guilty because I'm not reading it. Whereas if I'm subscribing to it digitally, borrowing the issues through the library, it doesn't bother me if I don't read an issue or two, and I kind of let those go by the wayside. Go back to the circulation numbers for the library. The print materials are dipping a little bit, but that's about 13% over the last 4 years. But what we're seeing is the e-materials are causing that to stay level overall because they're replacing the numbers
Such a huge
of circulations.
How large is the increase in e-materials?
About over the last 4 years, it's about 280% that has increased.
Which would kind of be concurrent with what's going on in the digital media.
Absolutely, and really the availability too of what we have, because that's really something that was a struggle at the very beginning. Libraries weren't able to respond because publishers were in this, they're almost circling the wagons. They wanted to make sure, they wanted to make sure that they weren't going to lose revenue off of their content, like they had seen the music publishing industry do, like they had seen the newspaper publishing industry do. And so what they did was they really didn't want to work with libraries at first. They saw libraries as the enemy, almost, because they said, well, if we sell you a book digitally, that means that anyone who lives in your community isn't going to buy this book. That was a grave misconception because I feel like people still do enjoy purchasing materials. They also, even if it's digital materials, if it's print materials, they enjoy adding it to their collection. There's still that group of people there. This digital age is not going to do away with that.
Right. And there's one aspect of the library that can never be replaced, which is that you can walk down aisle after aisle after aisle and review all the materials that are on the shelves, and perhaps give you a few ideas of what you might look for in the digital media.
Well, and the serendipity of that discovery too doesn't exist in digital titles. Unfortunately, there's not a good way for you to virtually walk down that aisle and browse the shelf.
Right. You can search for a book, an author, a few things will come up, but you can't look at 300, 400, 500 different titles all at once while you're browsing.
Yeah, just by spending 15 minutes in the building, right? And that's something that I enjoy myself. I grew up going to bookstores, grew up going to libraries, and just not knowing what you want to read that day, but walking into a section of the library and saying, something catching your eye. Maybe a subject that you never would have considered doing or reading catches your eye, and you pick it up and you start learning from that subject. That doesn't happen really with digital materials.
Right. Now, I think I mentioned to you I was at the 5 College book sale up in New Hampshire, Jaffrey, up in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. And it's really amazing the attraction that the printed word still has, because there were literally thousands of people that were there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's look at the operation of the library itself. It's a town-funded operation. But you have some specialities in there in terms of the circulation material. Then we can talk about the friends and other things that make the library move.
Yeah.
So what kind of support outside of the library do you have? And how do you, what state support is there in providing material for circulation?
Sure. So, of course, as you mentioned, we get our allocation from the municipality, which is wonderful. The town of Burlington and the residents have really been great supporters of the library. And during hard times, when some communities were cutting, Burlington wasn't cutting its library services. And I think that that's greatly appreciated. And I think that, we strive to do right by the town as well for that show of support. Outside of the municipal funding that we receive, we do receive state funding. So the state has grants and state aid that they provide twice a year.
Formula-based?
Formula-based. So it's based off of us meeting certain criteria and the library being certified. There are some libraries, some communities that have decertified their libraries. Saugus was one when I was going to library school at Simmons. I think
Making them, therefore, ineligible for matching funds.
For state aid, but even beyond that, they weren't able to go to another community. So residents of Saugus weren't able to go next door to, say, Malden or Melrose.
That's
or Lynn.
the collaborative, is it?
Not even. It's just a state law that if you receive state aid from Massachusetts, or if you're a public library in the state of Massachusetts, anybody who lives in Massachusetts can walk into your library and get a library card. So I could go into North Adams and get a library card in North Adams and borrow their materials just because I'm a resident of the state of Massachusetts. But Saugus residents, while their library was decertified, weren't able to do that. They could only use the materials that existed in Saugus. They couldn't get materials sent from another library. They couldn't go to that library and get a library card and check out materials. They were restricted to those materials alone. And so that's the real big concern anytime we start talking about cutting the funding to the library, is that potentially could happen. But when we're talking about state aid awards, we have to meet certain criteria, and those are that our municipal funding is growing, typically about 2% year by year, so that allocation is growing. That also we have 12% of our municipal funding dedicated towards purchasing circulating materials.
So that's a fixed formula.
That's
you
a
spend
fixed
$1 million
formula,
bucks, you got to spend $120,000 on material.
Exactly. And then also they require a certain number of operating hours while you're operating as a library, operating hours after 5 o'clock, operating hours over the weekend, and then overall operating hours as well. And there's a couple other determinations in there as well, but those are the three big ones.
And we're doing well in that regard.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, luckily with this last town meeting,
Yes, exactly.
we met that goal.
That
So
criteria. Now, what about the selection process for the material that's on the shelves?
Sure. So we have a group of librarians, people who have their masters in library science, and they divvy up the collection among themselves. We're actually revisiting that with the adult services because we've had a fair amount of shifting of individuals within positions and responsibilities. So we're looking at what we can do with that. Some people may have wanted to always select for the music CD collection, but it was someone else's responsibility. So this is kind of a nice time to free that up and allow people to maybe take on things that they've always wanted or give up things that they may not feel as strong in. But of course, we always have other things to guide us in selecting. So the individuals who are librarians, they're not just going based off of their knowledge. They're going by or their taste, exactly. Although I have to say, myself, when I was ordering music CDs, sometimes I let my taste creep in on that too. But that's why everybody has good taste in the library. I think
just
everybody
back from
has
New Orleans, so you're picking out Zydeco music.
Exactly. Some good Professor Longhair. But yeah. So then beyond that, the personal knowledge and taste. They have these review tools that they can look to. Individuals who are paid to review books, and that is their job. They look at the books, they judge the value of the book, the potential interest to readers, and then we do a lot of our purchasing based off of that as well.
What about the publishers? Are they involved in the libraries in terms of marketing different materials through the libraries? An author perhaps that they want to push?
That's more limited to the booksellers, I think. Of course, through those review tools that we use, a lot of booksellers use those as well. To judge what's going to be the next bestseller, because that's a difference between booksellers and libraries, right? We strive for breadth and depth. Booksellers are looking for breadth, of course, because they need to be able to sell to a wide variety of people who come through the door.
But there are specialty publishers.
Yes, but they're also looking to sell, the most popular books that are going to move in
the most expensive.
in their store. Yeah, exactly. So, when the reviewers are looking at it, sales pitches from publishers really don't fit into it. Where you do see some of that is during our professional conferences. All the publishers will be there, and they'll be talking about the newest slate of books that they're going to be publishing. And so that's where you'll get some of that. But direct to the libraries, not so much. Yeah.
Okay, 3 years ago, I think we added social media person.
Yeah.
So how is the library morphing into outreach?
Sure. So social media is, I think, something that's just necessary to any organization in today's day and age. People are on it, and so the businesses and the institutions need to be on it in order to respond to the needs and the questions. And it's interesting, anytime you give someone an avenue that you're communicating to them through, they'll communicate back to you through that avenue. So more so even than it being our sole platform to advertise, it's our platform to start a conversation as well. So we have social media in terms of Facebook. We just added a Twitter feed as well. We have a YouTube feed, which we fill with stuff from BCAT that we've done.
Well, we'll talk about that collaboration in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. And then we have a Instagram page for our young adults as well. The Facebook page is really where most of our conversation occurs. But of course, we're always working on improving the other services as well in the other feeds.
Now, this is relatively new in terms of the collaboration with BCAT. How much of your programming is making it to be televised? And what improvements can that collaboration result in?
Well, I'd love to expand on that collaboration. What BCAT's done with the Selectmen's Meeting Room, being able to stream that in those meetings, those sessions. It'd be great if we'd be able to do that with our programming space,
which is functionally the Fogelberg room, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a large room that seat about 125 people. It's split into thirds as well for people who want to have smaller meetings or when we do smaller programs. But right now we've been very lucky to have BCAT and volunteers in BCAT who come out as well.
Lugging cameras up there.
Yeah, lugging cameras, setting up the sound and everything. We just had him there last night for a undercover FBI agent, a retired undercover FBI agent. He was instrumental in the actions against El Chapo, and many other instances. I heard he was quite an interesting guy.
Yeah. He's the one who escaped from jail with the
tunneling.
bike, with the bike that was in the tunnel. I mean, there's a guy who had a lot of access to money, apparently.
Yeah,
tunnel
absolutely.
into a prison
Absolutely.
where you could ride a bike out. Unbelievable. So, reaching out with programming. I know that you had that Comic-Con, which was fantastic. What are some of the other programs that you have on a regular basis, and what do you look forward to in terms of expanding programming?
So we recently did a strategic plan for the library, a 5-year strategic plan, and a part of that was a community survey. When we did the community survey, a lot of what we heard was, we like what you're doing, do more of it. And so that's what we've been striving to do with programming especially, is expanding the amount of programming that we have, the times that we have it, the days that we have it. So what we're doing in some respects is we're taking programming that we're doing that's been successful and just doing it on other days as well. With the adult programming, typically what we did was one third Thursday program a month for adults, a general program. After I came in, took a look at that, looked at the funding and the support from the Friends, and started expanding on our adult programming as well. The adult programming that we have costs more than children's programming. Adult programming, it's about $2.35 a person who comes in through the door is what it costs on average. like to maximize that. But that's a pretty good number right now, honestly. If you think about what you could do for $2.35, there's not much in the scheme of things. Maybe not even buy a daily newspaper.
Although you seem to be doing pretty well with it.
Yeah, I think we're doing well with it. And so that's kind of my point. And then with children's programs, it's about 82 cents per attendee. And of course, that's because children's programs, we can make those less expensive, story hours,
which you
really
can
doesn't
conduct
cost
in-house
anything.
without an outside performer or an author, etc.
Exactly. So we're trying to duplicate the things that we do that are low cost, that are high attendance, but then we're also taking some of our, more adult programs, expanding on those, which cost a little bit more money, but I feel like the more we do that, the more participation we're going to be getting. Because when you do something just once a month and you start doing it then 2 times, 3 times, 4 times a month, people get in the habit of coming back. They learn more about what you're doing, because there's more people who are going out there, and word of mouth, which is incredibly important to any marketing plan. And then what we're also doing is we're looking at these incredibly large, library-wide, all ages type of programming, like
What
the
was it?
Comic-Con.
Comic-Con, that was cool.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We had over 1,000 people through the door that day. And it was throughout the library. We had a ton of programming all day long. We had a lot of volunteers who were helping us out. We had a lot of people who provided free programming as well, and then the retailers that we had. And so we're definitely going to have that again next year. We're going to change the date just because it ended up coinciding with PAX East, which is a pretty big gaming convention.
Right.
Unfortunately, they announced PAX East date after we had secured all of our bookings.
Comic-Con, sure, sure. Now, what about Dr. Conti at town meeting the other night said that we're speaking 50 different languages within the Burlington school system. What can the library do in the literacy area in promoting the idea of English as a second language and helping these new residents integrate themselves intellectually into the community?
Sure. So when I came in, we really didn't have a very large ESL collection. We had some books on CD and stuff like that. And unfortunately, those services, those publishers that provide those materials are dwindling. And I think it might be because conversation circles, ESL programs, in-person programs are becoming so important to the learning, through processing that knowledge and learning that. So what we've done is we've looked into our community to see who out there provides these services. English at Large is a state grant funded program. I know I'm probably going to misspeak in terms of the amount of funding that they have, but I know that they have 3 or 4 staff members. I think it's 3 full-time staff members, 1 part-time or seasonal staff member, and they coordinate over 2,000 volunteers who provide these conversation circles, who provide one-on-one ESL tutoring. So I reached out to them because they were looking for more spaces in the community to place their volunteers for these programs. And so now twice a week, we have English conversation circles in the library. They get about 15 people each session. And so it ends up being a great service to the community because we're always referring people outside of the library, for these services. I don't like that. Yeah, I like referring inside.
We got 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Two ideas. You get 1 minute and 25 seconds. You have an old collaboration and a new collaboration. Tell us about the Friends, and then tell us about the Garden Club.
Oh, great. So the Friends have been huge supporters of the library. Year in and year out, they provide a lot of effort to do our book sales, to do fundraisers, and they provided all of the programming money, all of the museum pass funding, and it was a huge, huge support and benefit to the community, and we're continuing that as well. Now, for a new partner, the Burlington Garden Club reached out a while back and wanted to improve our landscaping.
Because it needs work.
Yeah, it really did. We had some we had some trees out front that weren't doing too well, and benches that need to be replaced. We had some private donors who provided us those benches. The Department of Public Works, the Parks and Rec came in and helped us put those in. They've helped us a lot with pulling out some of the old boxwoods that we had, the old trees that we had, planting new trees. And the garden club is going to be doing some great things with it as well.
We need some flowers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, 10 seconds left. I want to
All right.
thank Mike, and then I
Thank
want to
you.
remind you that you can be a member of the Friends. It's relatively cheap and a lot of benefits for you at the library. And the May baskets will be drawn on
May 30th.
May 30th, and it's $5 for 5 tickets.
That's right.
I want to thank our guest, Mike Wick,
Yeah, thank
Library
you, Phil.
Director.
Appreciate it.
I'm Phil Gallagher. Thank you for joining us, BNEWS Special Report.